Hello again, fellow YouTubers. Solomon Pleasant back for another Cardfight Vanguard deck profile. And today we got another one of my personal favorite deck builds, I guess you could say. Just finished this on the day that this video has been uploaded. I just finished this build, so was really excited about that. One of my more long-awaited builds. I, at one point, contemplated building this. I'm like, nah, and then later I'm like, build this. It is necessary to build this deck. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to the Nubautama clan. Now, some of you might remember my Cardfight Vanguard, first Cardfight Vanguard clan analysis, where I mentioned Nubautama as the last entry because they didn't have any support yet. Well, guess what? They do now. And it is pretty awesome support, and we're gonna go right through that. So, for our starter, we have Stealth Beast Kekiro, and apologies in advance if I screw some of these names up. Some of these are very long and very difficult to pronounce. What Kekiro does is A, Forerunner, so I can move her back, and B, Soul Blast 1. When an attack hits a Vanguard during the battle that this unit boosted a Nubautama Vanguard, you may pay the cost, and if you do, choose 2 cards from your opponent's bind zone and put them in his or her drop zone. So if you can't tell just by the starter, Nubautamas have a new skill about binding, and boy do they do it well. And I'm glad Nubautamas got this skill, because honestly, I was aware that having cards where it could just be like, hey, I'm gonna make you discard everything, I realized that would be a bit overpowered to make a full clan that focuses around discarding, but I'm glad they used binding, because up until now, only like a couple of single cards used the bind effect, and they didn't really use it that well. They used it okay-ish, I guess. So I'm glad to see Nubautamas have this. So, really good starter. Like this starter. It's awesome. Moving on to the trigger lineup, I run 4 stand trigs, which would be Stealth Fiend and, forgive me for this, Mashioman. I think that's... Good God, that's hard to pronounce. That's not the first. That's not the last, and it definitely won't... That's definitely not the last, though. Blech. Anyway, this is the stand trig, and it's got a neat little ability that says, put this into the soul, choose one of your Nubautama units, and it gets +3 until the end of the turn. It's a pretty cool art, and a pretty good and it's a pretty good effect, I guess. So, what this does is I can power up my units and also decrease the amount of cards in my hand, which I'll show you in a minute is a really good thing for Nubautama. Because one thing I like about this deck build is that you can play really defensive with it and still come out on top. So, next I've got is for the draw trig, which would be Stealth Fiend Oat Suroza. Otuzroa. Oh god, I cannot pronounce these. Otuzura. There. Standard draw trig doesn't really do much. So, yeah. And one thing about Nubautamas is the only gets support in set 13, so it's pretty much a rainbow trigger, so these next things won't be really surprising. Run 4 crit triggers. Stealth Dragon. Kirogan. Oh, that was a little bit easier. So, besides the stand trigger, all these other trigs don't really do much. They're just kind of vanilla, but hey, it's a trigger lineup, so I can use Nubautama, which I'm not going to complain. And now the best freaking heal ever. We have Stealth Fiend Zashi Kaheme. I think that's how you say it. And just look at that face. Look at that face and tell me that is not adorable. That is an adorable little ghost. Take that over some of the other heals that are out there. So, pretty standard trigger lineup, pretty normal. It's the only thing I can use right now, but it's still pretty good for what it is. Moving on to the Grade 1 lineup, 1 P-Guard. Because YOLO. And also because this is a more defensive deck, and it focuses on restricting my enemies, so I really shouldn't need I really need more strength than I do defense, when you really look at it. Stealth Beast Majehakure. Majehakure. That's what I'm going with. It's basically the P-Guard. I only run one P-Guard. Not going to run really any more because I really think I only need one. So, P-Guard. Next, run, not 3, 4, Tempest Stealth Rogue Fakui. And what this guy does is Counterblast 1, put him into the Soul, and if you have a Vanguard with a Nubautama Vanguard, and the number of cards in your opponent's hand is 3 or less, you may pay the cost. If you do, choose a card at random from your opponent's hand and bind it face down. And at the end of the turn, your opponent puts that card bound by this effect into his or her hand. So, another thing with bind is anything that I bind with these guys, if I can't kill it in the bind zone, it usually goes back to the hand, but Stealth Beast over there is kind of useful for that, because she can Soul Blast and kill up to 2. Now, what's awesome is basically this guy takes a situation where my opponent barely has any cards in his hands, and makes it even worse by making him discard one. So I can do this like 3 times, still possibly have counterblasts left, and my opponent doesn't have a hand. So that's pretty awesome. So this guy is a really, really useful card. And he's a 7k, which doesn't make him that bad of a booster either. So he is really useful in this deck. Not as useful as my other card, like this next one, but still a pretty good card nonetheless. Next, I run 4 of this guy, Stealth Dragon Dreadmaster, my second favorite card in this deck. Dreadmaster is a boss, because he basically says Counterblast 1, when an attack hits during a battle that this unit boosted in Nubautama, if the number of cards in your opponent, if you have the number of cards is less than your opponent, Counterblast 1 and make him discard a card. Now, unlike Fuki, I get to choose which card to bind. This, my opponent gets to choose which card to discard. So, this guy automatically has now become a very, very, very dangerous Vanguard or Rearguard booster, because basically, if I don't have cards in my hand, my opponent basically is going to lose a card. They're going to lose cards when versing Nubautama. That should be a guarantee. You should know you are going to lose stuff from your hand regardless. It's just whether you want to sacrifice your Rearguard in order to do so. So, really awesome booster. It's a 7k, which makes it really, really good, so I love Dreadmaster. Not as much as the other guy I have in here, but still really love him. And finally, for rare ones, I run 4, Stealth Rogue of the Night, Sakura Fubuki. I think that's how I say it. Standard 8k, pretty cool 8k to say the least. I mean, that's a pretty long but awesome name. So, nice 8k. I'm glad Nubautama have 8ks now. Really good. Moving right along. Just gonna start the grade 2s. I run 4 Stealth Dragon Kojoyo. I think that's how you say it. This guy really helps with comboing. What he does is, during my turn, when an opponent's card is placed in the bind zone, if I have a Nubautama Vanguard, this unit gets +2 until +2,000 power till the end of the turn. So this becomes an 11k just by binding one unit, which is something Fuki can do really well. So I'll show you how to combo this. This combos really well with another card that I'm about to show, but this guy can be really powerful when you start binding a bunch of your opponent's units. It gets really powerful really quickly. And when you see one of the grade 3s I have here, you'll see how this can become a beast on the field, even though it's just a 9k. But really, really good card. That's why I went for him. Next for grade 2s, and one thing I'm going to mention is that Nubautamas are relatively easy to figure out how to make for it. It's not easy to find, per se, but it's easy to build. Based on, like, just the cards that they have, it's just like, well, since there's not that much to work with, the stuff that they give us is pretty good. Anyway, I run 4 Stealth Beast Tagahime. This thing's a boss. This basically says when I place it on Vanguard or Rearguard, if I have a Nubautama Vanguard, I choose one of my opponent's Rearguards and bind it face up in the bind zone. At the end of the turn, if it's still there, thank you Kikaro, the bound card can go back to my opponent's hand. Comboing this with my Stealth Dragon, call it, if this thing's on the field, +2. Just an automatic +2. And this thing really works well during turn 2 and sometimes turn 3 if you don't have something that, like the grade 3 I'm going to show you shortly, but this is really good. This is a really good card to have, and I'm happy I got all 4 that I need, because running 4 is awesome. And it's also 9k, which makes it even better. So run 4 of that guy. And finally for grade 2s, I run 4 of Stealth Rogue of 1,000 Blades, Aboro Zarkora, which is a boss 10k. Grant doesn't do much, but it's still pretty useful for Nubautama power. So, as you can see right now, a lot of my Nubautama stuff is 4 of each, which, yeah, it's pretty easy to build this if you have the cards for it. It's pretty easy to build because you pretty much just need 4 of each for a good chunk of the units. But let's move on to the important stuff, the grade 3s. First, I run 2 of one of my favorite cards ever, Stealth Dragon Voidmaster. So many people have given me crap about running this guy when really he is really effective. What this guy does is, first is automatic on Vanguard. When this unit attacks, if the number of cards in your hand is greater than your opponent's, this unit gets +3 until the end of the turn. So I can become a 12k if I have more cards in my hand than you, which, given Nubautama's track record of getting rid of cards, that isn't that hard, actually. But I don't play him for being on Vanguard, because he's a 9k, so he's not the best I have on Vanguard. I play him for his second ability, which is on Vanguard or Rearguard. I can counterblast 1, and when my attack hits, if the number of cards in my hand is less than my opponent's, I can basically do what Dreadmaster does and counterblast 1 to make him discard a card. So, imagine a column with Voidmaster and Dreadmaster swinging for 16 at one of your Rearguards, and you basically need to 10k guard it, or you're gonna lose a card. Ah, crap. So, any way you look at it, when I use Voidmaster, you're losing if I have less cards than you, you are losing a card. That is going to happen. It's just a matter of what you're going to lose. And comboing it with Dreadmaster here, 16, if I don't have any cards in my hand, my opponent's got more than like 4, there go 2 of his cards, right there, and a Rearguard, if they choose not to guard it. So, really, really good pressure on Rearguard. If there was a grade 2 that did this better, I'd probably use it, but Voidmaster's a boss, so I'm using Voidmaster, and I don't care what people say, because Voidmaster is freaking amazing. And now on to my other grade 3s. I run 3 of Shura Stealth Dragon, oh god, Kajukuri Kongo. This is basically the Nubautama Break Ride, which makes Nubautama even more boss. What this Break Ride does is, and that text is really small, when a Nubautama rides this unit, choose your Vanguard. Until the end of the turn, it gets +10 power, and your opponent chooses 1 card from his or her hand and discards it. Then, your opponent chooses 1 card from his or her hand and binds it face down until the end of the turn. Any card bound by this effect returns to the hand at the end of the turn. And this unit gets +2 if per se if my opponent has 3 or less cards, which Fubuki can really help get that +2 for this guy if I happen to Break Ride him. So, dang, this Break Ride's awesome. This basically says, hey, you lose 2 cards. Making it hard for my opponent to guard, which means when they're at 5 damage, they're gonna start getting screwed. So, this is a great Break Ride, really great Break Ride to have. I only run 3 because I save spots for Voidmaster, because Voidmaster is a boss, and I promised myself I would use him. Because I promised myself, if I could ever have a full Nubautama deck, I would use him. So I save space for him. But still good to have 3 of that Break Ride, because that Break Ride's a boss. Moving on to our final card of the deck, and arguably one of the best cards for... arguably one of the stronger cards for only being a double rare. I run 3 Shira Stealth Dragon, Kabuki Kongo. That's a little bit of a ridiculous name, but besides the point. This is a awesome ability. First, its act ability says Counterblast 1, and I can give +2 to this thing till the end of the turn. That's an okay ability if you're applying some pressure, but this other skill is awesome. Counterblast 1. When this unit attacks Vanguard, you may pay the cost, and if you do, bind all of your opponent's rearguards face up, and if the number of cards in your opponent's bind zone is 3 or more, this unit gets plus 10,000 power until the end of the battle, and bind rules apply like everything else. So, I combo that with the Break Ride. I'm at 21. I'm guaranteed a unit in the bind zone, and even if my opponent only has like 2 rearguards, yeah, that's 3 in the bind zone, and I'm at a 31k swing by myself, without any form of boost. So, this guy is really powerful and only needs 1 counterblast, which means I can do this repeatedly. I can just keep spamming this ability until you're out of defense and I pretty much kill you. So, this guy's really awesome. Now, a lot of people will run 4 of this guy and 4 of the Break Ride, but you know what? I got Voidmaster over there, and he's awesome, and I'm using him. I promised myself I would. So enough of that. Let me show you what a final formation for this deck would look like. Right about. Okay, so let's say this is what you have right now, and let's say these are the only 2 guys in your hand. Not bad, not bad. So make sure you got 4 damage, because otherwise you're going to probably die sooner or later. I mean, just threw some damage and stuff in there. Break Ride, my opponent's down 2 cards. And let's say my opponent only had 5, so he's got 3 left. Use his skill. Counterblast 1 to the soul, discard a card. And then just call out Dreadmaster. He's at +4. And since you have no cards in your hand, 16k at something doesn't really matter what, because as long as your opponent has something for rearguard, you can use this effect just fine. As long as your opponent has something in the rearguard circle and you've got like 1 or 2 already in there. You need to make sure that you have enough rearguards to bind with this effect, though, in order to get this thing fully off. So 16 at something, opponent has to drop something, they're just going to need to, and then activate this guy's ability, and assuming your opponent has a full field, just by 1 counterblast, your opponent's out of defense on the field, and this guy goes up by 2, 4, 6, 7, 8. That's up by 10. So that's plus 14 to this guy for 2 counterblasts. This guy's already got plus 14. So this is a 23k swinger for just 2 counterblasts. That's why this deck is awesome, because it's low cost and it can really mess with your opponent really quickly. And if your opponent decides not to guard and they're still not dead, Soul Blast 1 and 2 of his bound units are gone. Honestly, I'd go for units that are face down, because that way, that at least leaves them with less cards that means less cards I don't know about. And if they're still alive, finish, and let's say you got Twin Drive. That's your Twin Drive, not the best. So, hopefully at this point you can kill him with this guy, because if you don't, then you'd be kind of screwed with this kind of crappy Twin Drive. It would all matter on the Twin Drive, but overall, this is pretty much a legitimately good setup. There's some other ways you could do it. I just like having Voidmaster there with Dreadmaster, comboing that's got great pressure, because it's a 16k, which means more than a 5k unless their Vanguard is an 11. Then it's just like, oh, well, poo. But other than that, this is a really, really good build. I'm going to get all 3 of these guys in there, because all 3 of these guys play a really, really awesome part. I love this build. This build's great. I'm just glad I finally finished it and how great it actually works. So, this has been... Get in the middle, Voidmaster. Get in the middle. So, this has been Some Pleasant, signing off.